The smell of ozone and heated metal filled the air inside Station Helio 7's main exhibition hall. Hundreds of voices speaking dozens of languages created a constant buzz that echoed off the high ceilings. Weapons dealers from across the galaxy had set up their displays, each trying to outdo the others with holographic projections and flashy demonstrations. Dreth walked through the crowd with the confidence of someone who owned the place. His crystalline skin caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across nearby walls. He had been selling Valorian plasma weapons for 30 years, and business had never been better. 3 decades of dominance in the arms market had made him wealthy beyond measure, and arrogant beyond reason. His booth took up more space than any other. Plasma rifles lined the walls, each one glowing with internal energy. Shields that could stop any projectile hung on display stands. Artillery pieces that could level buildings sat on reinforced platforms. Every weapon represented the pinnacle of Valorian engineering, and the price tags reflected that superiority. A group of military buyers from the Kelthian Empire examined one of his rifles. Dreth smiled and picked up the weapon, activating its power cell. The rifle hummed to life, energy coursing through its crystalline firing chamber. "This is the TX-7 model," Dreth explained. "It can vaporize any target within 300 meters. The plasma bolt travels at near light speed and requires no ballistic calculations. Simply point and fire." The Kelthians nodded appreciatively. One of them asked about the price. 50,000 credits per unit, Dreth said without hesitation, plus 500 credits for each energy cell. "However, I assure you that one cell provides approximately 200 shots before requiring replacement." The buyers exchanged glances. The price was steep, but Valorian weapons were the best available. They began discussing terms while Dreth's assistants brought out contracts. Movement near the entrance caught Dreth's attention. A small group of humans had arrived, pushing carts loaded with plain equipment cases. They wore simple uniforms without any flashy insignia. No holographic displays, no fancy presentation materials, just basic tables and storage containers. Dreth watched with amusement as they set up their booth in a corner location. The woman leading the group had short dark hair and moved with military precision. Her name tag read, Wilson. A man with her, Ross, according to his tag, began unpacking weapons from the cases. Other dealers walked past the human booth without stopping. A few glanced at the displayed weapons and kept moving. Dreth understood why. The humans were showing firearms, actual chemical propellant projectile weapons, technology that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. After concluding his business with the Kelthians, Dreth decided to examine the human display more closely. Several of his regular clients followed him, curious about what had caught his attention. The human woman was arranging rifles on a table when Dreth approached. He picked up one of the weapons without asking permission. It felt heavy in his hands, all metal and composite materials. No energy signature, no glow, just mechanical parts assembled together. "Fascinating," Dreth said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I have not seen such primitive technology in decades. Tell me, do you also sell stone axes and wooden clubs?" His clients laughed. Wilson looked at him but said not respond immediately. She simply continued organizing her display. Dreth examined the rifle more closely. "Chemical propulsion, mechanical firing mechanisms. This requires physical projectiles, correct? How quaintly barbaric." Ross, the human engineer, spoke up. "That's an assault rifle, standard issue for it." "I know what it is," Dreth interrupted. "I studied ancient weapons technology in school. This belongs in a museum, not a modern arms exhibition." He set the rifle down and picked up a handgun. "And this? A pistol? Do you expect military forces to defend themselves against modern weapons with these antiques?" Wilson finally spoke. Her voice was calm and professional. "We expect military forces to defend themselves with whatever works best for their needs." "Works best?" Dreth laughed again. "My plasma rifles can vaporize any target instantly. They penetrate any armor. They never run out of ammunition with proper power cells. What can your primitive projectiles possibly offer that compares?" "A demonstration," Wilson replied simply. Dreth paused. I beg your pardon? We can provide a demonstration of our weapon systems. Tomorrow morning. Testing range 7. You can bring your plasma weapons and we can compare performance. The challenge hung in the air. Dreth's clients murmured among themselves. Several other dealers had stopped to listen to the conversation. Dreth's pride would not let him refuse. Very well, human. I accept your demonstration, though I warn you, this will likely be embarrassing for you. Wilson did not smile, but something in her eyes suggested she was not worried. Tomorrow morning, 900 hours. Bring whatever you want to compare. Oh, I shall, Dreth promised. And I shall bring witnesses as well. They will enjoy seeing primitive human technology fail against superior Valorian engineering. As Dreth walked away, his clients followed, already making jokes about the upcoming demonstration. Word spread quickly through the exhibition hall. By evening, nearly every arms dealer on the station had heard about the challenge. That night, Dreth sat in an expensive restaurant with his fellow dealers. They drank exotic beverages and shared stories about the foolish humans who thought their ancient weapons could compete with modern plasma technology. Perhaps they do not understand how far behind they are, suggested a dealer from the Threlian Confederacy. Or perhaps they are desperate for attention, added another. Humans are a young species. They have much to learn about galactic commerce. Dreth raised his glass. Tomorrow we teach them a valuable lesson about progress in technology. I propose a wager, gentlemen. I bet 5,000 credits that their demonstration lasts less than 10 minutes before they admit defeat. Several dealers took the bet. The conversation turned to other topics, but underneath the jokes and laughter, Dreth felt something he had not experienced in years. Uncertainty. The human woman's confidence had been real. She had not seemed worried or defensive. She had simply offered a demonstration. Dreth dismissed the feeling. He had 30 years of experience. His weapons were the best available. Whatever the humans planned to show tomorrow would be nothing compared to Valorian plasma technology. Meanwhile, at testing range 7, Wilson and Ross worked quietly. They unpacked equipment and organized ammunition. Ross checked each weapon carefully, making sure everything functioned perfectly. Think he will bring a crowd? Ross asked. Wilson smiled slightly. I am counting on it. The more witnesses, the better. You really think this will work? David, I have been doing this job for 15 years. I know exactly how this will work. They finished their preparations as the station's night cycle began. The weapons sat ready on their tables. Ammunition boxes were stacked and labeled. Everything was organized and prepared for the morning demonstration. Wilson looked at the equipment one final time before leaving. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, Dreth and everyone else would learn that humanity had not survived Earth by accident. They had survived by being practical, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. She turned off the lights and locked the range. Tomorrow could not come soon enough. Bright artificial sunlight flooded testing range 7 as the station's morning cycle began. The range stretched out for over a kilometer, with target stations set up at various distances. Reinforced barriers protected the observation area where dozens of aliens had already gathered. Dreth arrived early, bringing not just his clients but half the exhibition hall with him. Arms dealers, military procurement officers, and curious merchants filled the observation stands. Everyone wanted to see the humans embarrass themselves. Some had even brought recording equipment to capture the failure for posterity. Wilson stood near the firing line with Ross, checking their equipment one final time. She showed no signs of nervousness despite the large crowd. If anything, she seemed pleased by the turnout. Quite the audience you have attracted, Dreth called out as he approached. I hope you are prepared for this humiliation to be widely witnessed. I hope you are prepared to learn something. Wilson replied evenly. Dreth laughed and gestured to his assistants, who carried his best plasma rifle. Shall we begin? I insist on demonstrating my weapons first, so you understand what true military technology looks like. Wilson nodded. Please proceed. Dreth took his position at the firing line. His assistants set up the plasma rifle on a stabilizing stand and activated its power cell. The weapon glowed with internal energy, humming softly. The crowd leaned forward with interest. This is the TX-9 model, Dreth announced loudly. The finest plasma weapon currently available, observe. He aimed at a steel target 100 meters downrange and fired. The plasma bolt shot forward in a straight line, leaving a glowing trail in the air. It struck the target dead center and vaporized a perfect hole through the reinforced steel. The crowd murmured with approval. Dreth continued firing, hitting target after target. Moving drones, stationary plates, armored barriers. Each shot was precise and devastating. The plasma melted through everything it touched, leaving clean holes and scorched metal. As you can see, Dreth said proudly, plasma technology is clean, efficient, and absolutely effective. The energy output is precisely calibrated. The range is optimal. The targeting is flawless. He fired one more shot through a concrete barrier, the plasma boring straight through and melting the material. Now then, human, show us what your ancient projectile weapons can accomplish. Wilson thanked him politely and had Ross bring forward a standard military rifle. She checked the weapon quickly, loaded a magazine, and took her position at the firing line. This is a basic service rifle, she said simply. Standard full metal jacket ammunition. She fired at the same targets Dreth had used. The crack of the rifle was loud and sharp, very different from the soft hum of plasma. The bullets punched through the steel targets, creating jagged holes. The crowd watched with mild interest but no real enthusiasm. Dreth smiled. You see? The damage is inferior. The holes are rough and imprecise. Plasma is clearly— That was standard ammunition, Wilson interrupted. Now watch this. She ejected the magazine and loaded a different one. Armor-piercing rounds. This time when she fired, the bullets went completely through the heavily armored target that had resisted Dreth's plasma. The rounds punched entrance and exit holes, creating massive internal damage. The crowd grew quieter. Wilson continued. Hollow point ammunition. She fired at a ballistic gel target. The bullet entered small but expanded inside, creating a wound channel that made several aliens step back in shock. The gel block was nearly destroyed from internal damage. Incendiary rounds. The target burst into flames that continued burning long after the bullet hit. Explosive rounds, a fortified bunker exploded from the inside as the round detonated after penetration. Dreth's smile faded. He had not expected this variety. Plasma had one setting, maximum damage. But these humans had different ammunition types for different purposes. Ross brought out a sniper rifle and set it up at the firing line. Effective range of plasma weapons is about 300 meters before the bolt disperses, Wilson said. Our effective range is considerably longer, Ross fired. The target 800 meters away, barely visible to most observers, shattered as the bullet struck dead center. He fired again. A target at 1,000 meters. Another perfect hit. Plasma loses cohesion over distance, Wilson explained. Bullets do not. The Rangemaster activated an electromagnetic interference field, standard for testing weapon resilience. Dreth's plasma rifle immediately began showing error warnings on its display. The targeting system flickered. When Dreth tried to fire, the bolt veered off course and missed completely. Wilson picked up her rifle and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. Every round hit its target perfectly. No electronics required for basic operation, she said. Mechanical systems are not affected by electromagnetic interference. Next came a dust storm simulation. Thick particles filled the air between the firing line and targets. Dreth's plasma bolts scattered and lost energy in the dense environment, barely scorching the targets. Wilson's bullets cut through without deviation, hitting with full force. The crowd was no longer making jokes. Military officers were taking notes on datapads. Procurement specialists were whispering urgently to each other. Wilson had Ross bring out a light machine gun. The belt-fed weapon looked brutal and mechanical. Ross positioned it on a bipod and loaded a belt of 200 rounds. Sustained fire capability, Wilson announced. Ross pulled the trigger and did not let go. The machine gun roared continuously, spent casings flying through the air in a golden stream. Bullets shredded target after target in an unrelenting barrage. 20 seconds of continuous fire before the belt ran empty. Your plasma rifle needs cooling breaks after 30 shots, Wilson observed. This can maintain suppressive fire for as long as ammunition lasts. She had Ross field strip the rifle in front of everyone. 60 seconds to completely disassemble the weapon. 60 seconds to put it back together. No energy cells. No complex circuitry. No specialized calibration. Just mechanical parts that any trained soldier can maintain. Ross took the reassembled rifle and dunked it in a bucket of muddy water. He pulled it out, gave it a quick shake, wiped the bolt, and fired. The weapon functioned perfectly. An assistant tried the same with a plasma rifle. It sparked and died immediately. Dreth watched in growing horror as his understanding of weapons technology crumbled. Everything he knew, everything he had believed for 30 years was being challenged by these humans and their supposedly primitive firearms. Wilson projected a cost comparison on a display screen. One Valorian plasma rifle. 50,000 credits plus 500 credits per energy cell. One human rifle. 1,200 credits plus 10 cents per round. The difference was staggering. A Thracian general in the crowd stood up. But plasma vaporizes targets instantly. Your bullets might not stop an enemy immediately. Wilson loaded another rifle and fired at a combat dummy wearing body armor. The impact was devastating. The dummy's entire torso collapsed from the energy transfer. Internal organs destroyed by hydrostatic shock. Plasma cauterizes as it burns, Wilson explained. Clean holes. Quick death. Our rounds create wound channels, transfer kinetic energy, cause massive trauma to tissue and organs. The temporary cavity alone can be fatal. She showed ballistic gel comparisons on screen. Plasma created a neat tunnel. Bullets created a cone of destruction, tearing through everything in their path. The demonstration continued for another hour. Different weapons, different ammunition types, different tactical scenarios. Every test revealed another advantage of human weapons technology: reliability, versatility, cost-effectiveness, adaptability to any environment. By the end, the crowd was silent. No one was laughing. No one was making jokes about primitive humans. Dreth stood frozen, his crystalline face showing confusion and shock. His plasma rifle sat beside him, suddenly looking less impressive than it had that morning. Wilson approached him directly. We have 4 more weapon types to demonstrate. Heavy weapons, explosive systems, indirect fire capabilities, and close-quarters combat. Tomorrow. Same time. You are welcome to attend. Dreth could only nod slowly. He looked at the targets downrange, seeing the different damage patterns. Plasma had burned neat holes. Human weapons had destroyed, shattered, exploded, and obliterated. As the crowd dispersed, Dreth heard military officers approaching the human booth immediately. They were already asking about bulk orders, training packages, and delivery schedules. One of Dreth's clients approached him. Perhaps we should reconsider our procurement plans. Another added, the cost difference alone is remarkable. Dreth watched them walk toward the human booth. His 30 years of dominance was crumbling after just one demonstration, and Wilson had said she had 4 more weapons types to show. He looked at his plasma rifle one final time before leaving the range. It still glowed with internal energy, still hummed with power, but somehow it seemed less impressive now, less practical, less useful. Tomorrow he would return with more witnesses. Not to see the humans fail, but to understand just how much he had underestimated them. Word of yesterday's demonstration had spread across the entire station overnight. When Dreth arrived at testing range 7 the next morning, he found the observation area completely packed. Military delegations from species he had never even heard of filled the stands. News reporters positioned cameras for optimal coverage. Even the station administrator had come to watch. Wilson and Ross had brought significantly more equipment today. Large crates marked with Earth military designations sat stacked near the firing line. Whatever they planned to demonstrate required serious hardware. Dreth found a seat in the front row. Several other arms dealers sat nearby, their expressions showing the same uncertainty he felt. Yesterday had shaken their confidence. Today might destroy it completely. Wilson did not waste time with introductions. She went straight to work. Long-range precision, she announced, gesturing to Ross, who was setting up a large rifle on a specialized stand. Effective engagement range of plasma weapons tops out around 300 meters. Beyond that, energy dispersal makes accuracy impossible. She pointed to a target at the far end of the range, 1,200 meters away. Most aliens could barely see it, even with enhanced vision. Ross made several adjustments to the rifle's scope. He checked a small device that measured wind speed and direction. He even compensated for the station's slight rotation. Then he fired once. The crowd watched the magnified camera feed. The bullet traveled for nearly 2 full seconds before striking the tiny target dead center. Any properly trained marksman can make this shot, Wilson said. We will happily train your forces in long-range engagement tactics. A Kelthian admiral stood up. This is impressive, but surely specialized weapons like this are prohibitively expensive. Wilson smiled. This rifle costs 3,000 credits. The scope adds another 1,000. Total investment. 4,000 credits for capability your plasma weapons cannot match at any price. She had Ross fire several more times, hitting targets at extreme distances with casual precision. Each shot reinforced the same message. Human weapons could reach out and touch enemies that plasma could not even threaten. Next came the explosives. Ross opened a crate and removed a cylinder with a trigger mechanism. Grenade launcher, he explained. Fires explosive projectiles with various detonation types. He loaded one round and fired. The grenade arced through the air and struck a reinforced bunker 200 meters away. The explosion collapsed the entire structure, sending debris flying in all directions. The crowd jumped at the blast. Several aliens moved back instinctively. Plasma burns through armor, Wilson said over the ringing echo. Explosives destroy everything nearby. Area effect versus point target. Ross demonstrated different grenade types. Fragmentation rounds that sent shrapnel in every direction. Thermobaric rounds that created devastating pressure waves. Smoke rounds for concealment. Flashbang rounds for stunning enemies without killing them. Each type served a specific tactical purpose. Each solved a different problem. The versatility was staggering. Now we move to sustained firepower, Wilson announced. Ross and another assistant set up a heavy machine gun on a tripod. The belt-fed weapon looked brutal. Hundreds of rounds connected in a long belt that fed into the firing mechanism. Crew-served weapon, Wilson explained. Designed for area denial and suppressive fire. Ross opened fire. The machine gun roared like thunder. Spent casings poured onto the ground in a brass waterfall. Target drones advancing downrange were shredded one after another. The sustained fire went on for a full minute before Ross stopped. 500 rounds. 1 minute. Every target destroyed. A single crew with this weapon can hold a defensive position against hundreds of attackers, Wilson said. Plasma rifles overheat after 30 shots. This keeps firing as long as you feed it ammunition. Dreth found himself leaning forward despite his shock. The tactical implications were obvious. One crew with that weapon could control an entire battlefield. The firepower was overwhelming, but Wilson was not finished. She unveiled what looked like a large tube with a trigger mechanism. Anti-armor system, she said simply. The crowd stirred nervously. Several military representatives stood for a better view. Ross positioned himself with the tube on his shoulder. Downrange, a heavily armored vehicle sat as a target, the kind of armor that could withstand repeated plasma hits. Ross aimed and fired. The rocket streaked away with a trail of smoke. It struck the vehicle and exploded with tremendous force. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but twisted, burning wreckage. Dead silence filled the observation area. Plasma might eventually burn through heavy armor, Wilson said quietly. This destroys it instantly. Shaped charge warhead. Focused explosive penetration. 1 shot, 1 kill. She showed technical diagrams of how the warhead worked. The physics were brutal and elegant. The crowd of military professionals understood immediately what they were seeing. A new type of warfare. One where armor meant nothing. Next, Wilson introduced something called a mortar. A tube that fired projectiles in high arcs. She explained indirect fire, hitting targets behind cover, over hills, around obstacles. Ross fired several mortar rounds. They flew high into the air and came down on targets the observers could not even see from their position. Explosions erupted behind barriers and inside fortified positions. Line of sight is no longer required, Wilson explained. We can hit enemies that we cannot see that cannot see us. Effective range of this model is 8 kilometers. We have larger versions that reach 40 kilometers. The paradigm shift was complete. Everything the military professionals in the crowd knew about warfare had just become obsolete. Wilson moved to close-quarters weapons. Shotguns that fired multiple pellets in a spread pattern, devastating at short range. Compact pistols for personal defense. Submachine guns for fighting in corridors and buildings. Not every battle happens at range, she said. Sometimes combat is in ships, stations, urban environments. These weapons dominate close quarters. She fired a shotgun at multiple targets in rapid succession. The spread pattern meant she did not need perfect aim. At close range, the damage was absolutely catastrophic. Then she brought out a tactical display and showed how all these weapons integrated. Snipers providing overwatch. Machine guns creating suppression zones. infantry advancing with rifles, mortars hitting distant targets, anti-armor teams eliminating threats, close-quarters specialists clearing buildings. "You see weapons," Wilson said. "We see a complete combat system. Every element supports the others. Every soldier trains on multiple weapon types. This is combined arms warfare." Ross added, "And every weapon system I have shown you today costs less than a single plasma rifle." Wilson projected the final cost analysis. Equipping 1,000 soldiers with Valorian plasma weapons, 52 million credits. Equipping the same unit with complete human weapon systems including all types demonstrated, 6 million credits including ammunition, spare parts and training. The procurement officers in the crowd began urgent conversations with their command structures. Some were already transmitting orders. Dreth sat motionless, his world collapsing around him. Everything he had built for 30 years was crumbling. His expensive plasma weapons suddenly looked like overpriced toys compared to practical human systems. Wilson pulled out one final item. A simple hand grenade. "Cost 15 credits, she said. "Effective casualty radius 15 meters. She threw it into a fortified position. The explosion sent shrapnel in every direction, destroying everything inside. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution," Wilson observed. The demonstration ended. But instead of dispersing, the crowd surged toward the human booth. Military officers waved contracts. Procurement specialists shouted questions about bulk orders. Even competing arms dealers asked about distribution rights. Dreth remained in his seat, watching his market dominance evaporate. Clients he had served for years walked past him without a glance, heading straight to Wilson. Finally, he stood and approached her. "You have destroyed my business in 2 days." Wilson looked at him without sympathy but without cruelty either. "Your business was built on selling expensive solutions to simple problems. That was always going to fail eventually. What am I supposed to do now?" "Adapt," Wilson said. "Or die. That is what humans do. That is what all survivors do." She turned back to her crowd of customers. Dreth walked away slowly, passing his own booth in the exhibition hall. His beautiful plasma weapons sat on display, glowing and humming with power. No one was looking at them. Everyone had gone to see the humans. Dreth stood alone in his empty booth, surrounded by technology that had dominated the market for decades. Technology that had just become obsolete in 48 hours. He thought about his options. He could fight this change and lose everything. Or he could find a way to adapt to this new reality. The choice, he realized, was simple. Survive or perish, just like Wilson had said. Just like humans had always done on their violent little planet. Tomorrow he would make a decision. Tonight he would drink and think and plan. The age of energy weapons was ending. The age of human practicality was beginning. And Dreth had to decide which side of that transition he wanted to be on. 3 weeks had passed since the demonstrations. Dreth sat in his showroom office reviewing financial reports that made his crystalline skin darken with stress. Sales down 73%, major contracts canceled. Clients who had been loyal for years were now buying from the humans. His assistant entered with another message. "The Keldor Defense Force has canceled their order. They chose the human weapons package instead." Dreth dismissed her with a wave. Through his office window, he could see across the station corridor to the human storefront. It had expanded from a simple booth into a full commercial operation. A steady stream of customers went in and out. Military delegations, independent colonies, even other weapons dealers looking for distribution rights. The Valorian Weapons Consortium had sent him 3 urgent messages, demanding explanations. His suppliers wanted to know why orders had dropped so dramatically. His clan's trading council was asking difficult questions about his business decisions. Everything he had built for 30 years was falling apart. Dreth decided he needed to understand what was happening. He wrapped himself in a hooded cloak to avoid recognition and crossed the corridor to the human storefront. Inside, the space was organized like a military supply depot. No flashy displays, no holographic projections, just practical tables with weapons and equipment laid out for examination. Everything was hands-on. Customers could hold the weapons, feel their weight, understand their mechanics. Wilson stood near the back explaining rifle maintenance to a group of Threllian officers. Ross was showing different ammunition types to procurement specialists from a species Dreth did not recognize. Another human was demonstrating proper shooting stance to a young soldier. Dreth moved quietly through the store, observing. A Kelthian admiral sat at a table with Wilson, discussing fleet defense needs. Wilson had charts and diagrams spread out, analyzing the admiral's tactical situation. Your engagement profile shows most combat occurs between 100 and 500 meters, Wilson explained. Energy weapons overheat in sustained combat. You need reliability and sustained fire capability. She recommended specific weapons: rifles for infantry, machine guns for suppressive fire, rockets for anti-boarding defense. She included training schedules, maintenance protocols, spare parts lists, and tactical doctrine manuals. The total package cost less than just upgrading the fleet's existing energy weapon maintenance systems. The admiral signed the contract immediately. Dreth watched several more consultations. Wilson never just sold products. She analyzed each client's needs, recommended appropriate solutions, sometimes even suggested not buying certain items if they did not fit the tactical situation. A young officer from a small independent colony asked about defending against pirates. Wilson looked at his budget and shook her head. You do not need anti-armor rockets. You face small ships and boarding parties, not heavy vehicles. Take these rifles and this ammunition instead. Save your credits for training and spare magazines. The honesty stunned Dreth. She was turning down profit to give better advice. This built trust that no amount of advertising could achieve. He noticed something else. Wilson treated every customer with equal respect. A representative from a tiny colony received the same attention as a major military power. No condescension, no pressure, just practical help. This was completely different from Dreth's approach. He had always sold prestige and superiority, the most expensive weapons to the wealthiest clients, status symbols as much as tools. Humans sold solutions to problems. They made their customers more effective rather than just making them feel powerful. Dreth left the store and returned to his office. He called an emergency meeting with other energy weapon dealers. They gathered in a private conference room, all facing the same crisis. A Threllian dealer suggested starting a price war. We drop our costs below the humans, undercut their market. Another proposed forming a coalition to exclude human weapons from certain territories. We have established relationships. We can pressure clients to honor existing contracts. A third wanted to file complaints with station authorities about primitive technology being dangerous. Dreth listened to all the suggestions and realized none would work. The humans had not just undercut prices. They had changed the entire nature of the weapons market. They offered better solutions at lower costs with superior support. Fighting them directly was futile. Dreth made a decision that surprised himself. He contacted Wilson and requested a private meeting. She agreed, seeming amused. They met in a quiet cafe overlooking the station's observation deck. Ships moved through space beyond the windows. Dreth sat across from Wilson, his pride finally broken enough to speak honestly. You have destroyed my business in 3 weeks. Wilson nodded. Your business was vulnerable. You sold status symbols instead of practical tools. That model could not survive real competition. How do I compete with what you offer? Wilson considered the question carefully. You probably cannot. Not directly. Dreth felt his hopes sink, but Wilson continued. However, your plasma technology has legitimate advantages. Cauterization prevents blood trails, useful for certain stealth operations. No ammunition means sustained fire if you solve the heat problems. Clean energy signatures help with sensor management in specific situations. She leaned forward. Don't compete, specialize. Find niche applications where plasma genuinely works better. Partner with weapon systems instead of opposing them. Dreth had never considered this approach. You would recommend my weapons alongside yours? If they serve a purpose, absolutely. Different tools for different situations. That is how humans think. She showed him several tactical packages she had designed that included both human ballistic weapons and energy weapons for specific roles, combined systems that played to each technology's strengths. We are not trying to dominate the market, Wilson explained. We are trying to make people effective. If your technology helps accomplish that, we will work with you. The concept was revolutionary to Dreth. Cooperation instead of competition. Practical effectiveness instead of market dominance. After the meeting, Dreth returned to his showroom. His staff waited for his decision. He could continue fighting and lose everything, Or he could adapt to this new reality. He thought about his 30 years of experience, his knowledge of the market, his established relationships with military forces across known space, his understanding of energy weapon technology. All of that still had value. He just needed to apply it differently. Dreth made a call to Wilson. "Let us discuss a partnership." The negotiation took 2 weeks. Dreth closed his old showroom and renovated a new space. The sign now read, "Integrated Combat Solutions, Valorian and Human Systems." His new business model was completely different. He offered combined packages. Human weapons as primary arms with specialized Valorian plasma systems for specific applications. Space combat where ballistics risk hull breaches. Sterilization operations where cauterization was valuable. Sensor-sensitive missions where energy signatures helped or hindered. He stopped trying to sell the most expensive option. Instead, he analyzed what clients actually needed and recommended appropriate solutions. Sometimes that meant mostly human weapons with a few plasma units. Sometimes it meant the reverse. His profit margins were lower, but his sales volume increased dramatically. More importantly, his clients were more effective in combat, which led to referrals and repeat business. 2 months after the demonstrations, Dreth's sales had recovered to 60% of his original levels and were climbing steadily. He was developing new plasma technologies designed to complement human weapons rather than replace them. One afternoon, he saw Wilson across the corridor. She was showing a new client the rifle demonstration. She noticed Dreth and nodded with what looked like respect. Dreth nodded back. He had learned more in 3 months than in 30 years of arrogant dominance. That evening, he reviewed designs for a new plasma system. Compact units that could attach to human rifles as auxiliary weapons. Best of both technologies in one platform. His engineers thought it was possible. He sent the designs to Wilson for feedback. She responded within an hour with suggestions and improvements. They were working together now, partners instead of enemies. Dreth looked at the old TX-9 plasma rifle sitting in his office. It had been his flagship product for a decade. Now it was obsolete, but the technology behind it still had value if applied correctly. He had mocked human weapons for being primitive. He had laughed at their simple mechanical systems. He had been absolutely certain of his own superiority, and he had been completely wrong. The humans had not destroyed him with superior firepower. They had defeated him with superior thinking, practical solutions instead of expensive prestige, versatility instead of specialization, cooperation instead of dominance. Dreth had learned to ask a new question. Not what impresses people, but what actually works. That simple change in perspective had saved his business and taught him more about warfare than 30 years of selling plasma weapons. He opened his sign program and began sketching a new integrated weapon system. Human ballistics for primary fire, Valorian plasma for specialized applications, combined training doctrine, unified maintenance protocol. The future was not about energy weapons or ballistic weapons. It was about using the right tool for the right job. And for the first time in months, Dreth felt excited about his work again. 6 months after the demonstrations at Station Helio 7, Dreth found himself standing backstage at the largest military conference in the galaxy. The Galactic Security Summit took place every 5 years on the capital world of the Terran-aligned systems. 40 species sent representatives. Military leaders, political officials, and defense industry experts gathered to discuss the future of warfare. This year's central topic, modern warfare doctrine and weapons integration. Dreth had been invited as a keynote speaker. Him, a dealer who had spent 3 decades selling overpriced plasma weapons before humans taught him better. Now he was supposed to address the most important military minds in known space. He looked through the backstage curtain at the massive auditorium. Thousands of seats filled with officers, admirals, generals, and ministers. Recording equipment from every major news service aimed at the stage. This speech would reach billions across dozens of worlds. His presentation was titled, "From Mockery to Mastery, What Humans Taught Me About Warfare." A conference assistant approached. 5 minutes, Speaker Dreth. Dreth nodded and reviewed his notes one final time. Through the windows behind the stage, he could see a human military training facility. Alien soldiers and mixed-species units practiced with Earth weapons and tactics. The sight was now common across civilized space. The announcer called his name. Dreth walked onto the stage to polite applause. He stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. 6 months ago, he would have been terrified. Now he just wanted to share what he had learned. "I begin with a confession," Dreth said. 6 months ago, I was an arrogant fool. He displayed footage from the first demonstration on the massive screens behind him. His own face crystalline and condescending as he picked up a human rifle and mocked it. His laughter. His insults. His absolute certainty that plasma weapons were superior. "That is me," Dreth said, watching my entire understanding of warfare become obsolete. Too proud to recognize it. Too arrogant to learn, he showed more footage. The demonstrations. Wilson's calm professionalism. The weapons proving themselves again and again. His own expression changing from mockery to confusion to shock. "I was not just wrong about weapons," Dreth continued. "I was wrong about everything: progress, technology, effectiveness. I mistook complexity for advancement. I confused expense with value. I assumed sophisticated meant superior." The audience listened in complete silence. Dreth explained what he had learned. How humans optimized for results instead of appearances. How their supposedly primitive chemical propulsion had been refined through thousands of years of brutal warfare. How every detail of their weapons served a practical purpose. "We thought simplicity meant primitiveness," Dreth said. "That was our fatal error. Human weapons are simple because simplicity works. Mechanical reliability, adaptability to any environment, maintenance that any soldier can perform. These are features, not flaws." A Draconid general stood to ask a question. "But surely there are situations where energy weapons remain superior." Dreth agreed immediately. "Absolutely. And that illustrates another human lesson. There is no single superior weapon. Success comes from integration, not dominance of one technology." He displayed tactical scenarios where plasma and ballistic weapons complemented each other. Space combat where both technologies served different roles. Ground operations where mixed arsenals provided maximum flexibility. Humans taught me to ask, what does this situation require? Not what makes me look advanced. Next, Dreth presented combat data from recent conflicts. The Keldor Defense Force had repelled a major pirate attack with minimal losses using human weapons and tactics. Cost of victory: 12,000 credits in ammunition and repairs. Their previous engagement with plasma weapons had cost 340,000 credits in equipment losses and much higher casualties. Similar results from a dozen different species. Lower costs, higher effectiveness, fewer casualties, better outcomes. "This is not theory," Dreth emphasized. "This is battlefield reality." He introduced Colonel Ryan Foster, a human military advisor who had been training alien forces. Ryan explained Earth's approach to warfare. Not just selling weapons, but teaching survival. Training programs customized for each species. Tactical doctrine that worked with different physiologies and psychologies. "We learned as much from teaching as they learned from us," Ryan said. "A Threlian needs different rifle ergonomics than a Valorian. Desert species require different maintenance schedules than aquatic species. Humans adapted our weapons and tactics for each client." Ryan showed footage of mixed species units training together. Aliens who 6 months ago had never touched a firearm now performing complex combat maneuvers. Coordinated squad tactics. Supporting fire. Covering advances. All using human doctrine adapted for their specific needs. The transformation was remarkable. These were not just soldiers with new weapons. They were effective fighting forces with improved tactics and better coordination. Dreth returned to the podium to discuss the economic revolution. Smaller species and independent colonies could now afford real defense. Military strength was no longer limited to wealthy empires. Several minor species had formed mutual defense pacts, armed with human weapons, creating a balance of power that prevented larger empires from exploitation. "The weapons market has been democratized," Dreth explained. "This changes galactic politics fundamentally." A montage played on the screens. Workshops on logistics, training centers teaching combined tactics, diplomatic conferences on military cooperation. Humans not as conquerors but as teachers and partners. Their influence spreading through practical effectiveness rather than force. During the question period, a young officer asked why humans had developed such effective weapons when they could have pursued energy technology instead. Wilson, attending as an observer in the audience, stood to answer. "Because we had to," she said simply. "Earth's history is violent. We fought each other for thousands of years. Every weapon was refined through brutal, practical experience. We did not develop these weapons to conquer you. We developed them to survive each other." The honesty created an uncomfortable silence. She continued, "But here is what you need to understand. Weapons are tools. The real question is what you do with them. We are teaching you to fight effectively. Make sure you fight for the right reasons." She reminded the audience that Earth itself had nearly destroyed itself several times. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, planetary devastation barely avoided through luck and last-minute wisdom. "Power without wisdom is just a faster path to destruction," Wilson warned. "We give you capability. You must provide the judgment about how to use it." The sobering message settled over the conference. These were not just better guns. This was the ability to wage more effective warfare. That power came with responsibility. Dreth concluded his presentation with personal reflection. 6 months ago, I mocked human weapons because they did not fit my understanding of progress. Today, I am successful because I learned to question my assumptions. The humans did not just show us better weapons, they showed us better thinking. He received a standing ovation. After the formal conference, Dreth and Wilson stood together watching alien soldiers train. A Kelthian squad practiced coordinated assault tactics using mixed human and Valorian weapons. Their instructor, a human sergeant, corrected their formation. "Your speech was good," Wilson said. "I only told the truth, that I was wrong and you were right. You adapted. That matters more than being right initially." They watched the training in comfortable silence. The mixed species units moved with growing competence. Human weapons in alien hands backed by human tactics adapted for alien thinking. "I wonder what other human innovations we have been too arrogant to recognize," Dreth mused. Wilson smiled. "Well, we do have this thing called democracy that might interest your political leaders." Dreth laughed genuinely. "One revolution at a time, Wilson. One revolution at a time." They shook hands, not just business partners, but friends who had both learned important lessons. Dreth about humility and practical thinking. Wilson about patience and cultural adaptation. The training exercise concluded successfully. The alien soldiers performed better than most human units at equivalent training levels. They had natural advantages in some areas, better senses, stronger physiology, enhanced endurance. Combined with human weapons and tactics, they were formidable. Dreth thought about his journey. From arrogant dominance to humiliating failure to successful adaptation, the humans had not destroyed him. They had educated him, and that education had made him better at his work than 30 years of unchallenged success ever had. The future of warfare was not about energy weapons or ballistic weapons. It was about effectiveness, about using what worked, about adapting to reality instead of clinging to assumptions, simple lessons. But Dreth had needed humans to teach him those simple truths. He looked at his data pad. Orders coming in from 3 new clients, training requests from 2 more, partnership proposals from former competitors who now understood that cooperation beat competition. Business was excellent, better than ever, and more importantly, he felt good about his work. He was helping people defend themselves effectively. He was solving real problems with practical solutions. That satisfaction was worth more than all the profits from his years of selling overpriced status symbols. Dreth and Wilson parted ways, each returning to their work. The conference continued for 3 more days, but Dreth's message had already spread. Adaptation, practical thinking, cooperation, effectiveness over appearance. The galaxy was changing. Humans had started that change with weapons demonstrations on a space station. Now it was spreading across civilized space, transforming how everyone thought about warfare, technology, and progress. And Dreth, the dealer who had once mocked primitive, human weapons, was now teaching others those same lessons he had learned the hard way. 1 year had passed since Dreth first mocked human weapons at Station Helios 7. Now he stood in his expanded business headquarters, reviewing reports that showed the complete transformation of his company and his life. Sales had exceeded his old records by 40%. But more importantly, his client satisfaction ratings were the highest in the industry. Military forces equipped with his integrated systems reported better combat effectiveness, lower casualty rates, and significantly reduced operational costs. His communications console chimed with an incoming message. A request from the Threlian Confederacy for weapons consultation on a large-scale military modernization program, worth millions of credits. They specifically requested him by name. A year ago, such contracts had been routine. Now each one felt like validation that he was doing the right work. His assistant entered with schedule updates. 3 training sessions today. Morning, Kelthian officers learning maintenance protocols. Afternoon, Draconid procurement specialists reviewing tactical packages. Evening, conference call with the Valorian Weapons Consortium about the new hybrid rifle project. Dreth nodded and headed to the first session. His training facility had expanded to twice its original size. Multiple ranges allowed simultaneous instruction for different species. Human advisors worked alongside Valorian engineers, teaching integrated systems to eager students. In the morning session, 6 Kelthian officers stood around a table covered with disassembled weapons. Dreth walked them through maintenance procedures, explaining not just how but why each step mattered. "This spring controls the firing pin tension," he explained, holding up a small component. "If it weakens, you get misfires. Check it every 1,000 rounds. Replace it every 5,000. Cost, 2 credits. Effect, perfect reliability." One officer asked, "Why not use electronic firing mechanisms like plasma weapons?" Dreth smiled. A year ago, he would have agreed that electronic was superior. Now he understood better. Electronics fail in electromagnetic fields. They require power sources. They need specialized tools for repair. This mechanical system works in any environment, needs no power, and any soldier can fix it with basic tools. That is the human lesson. Simple is better when simple works. The officers took notes carefully. They had learned that Dreth's new teaching methods saved lives. His old approach had been selling products. His new approach was ensuring effectiveness. After the session, Dreth reviewed the afternoon presentation materials. The Draconid government was considering a complete military overhaul. Their current energy weapon systems were expensive to maintain and showed poor performance in their recent border conflicts. Dreth had prepared a comprehensive analysis, not just weapons recommendations but complete force restructuring, training protocols, logistics chains, ammunition supply systems, maintenance schedules adapted for Draconid physiology and their home planet's environmental conditions. This was what separated his company now, not just selling tools, but providing complete solutions. He had learned this from watching Wilson work. The humans never just handed over weapons and walked away. They ensured their clients could actually use what they bought. The Draconid specialists arrived precisely on time. Dreth presented his analysis, over 3 hours, answering detailed questions about every aspect of the proposal. Their senior procurement officer had a key concern. "Our soldiers have trained with energy weapons for generations. Changing to ballistic systems requires complete retraining. Is this practical?" Dreth displayed comparison data. Initial training takes 12 weeks. Combat effectiveness improves within 6 weeks. Casualty rates drop by an average of 55%. Operational costs decrease by 70%. Yes, retraining requires investment, but the returns appear within 1 year. He showed real examples, species that had made the transition, their performance improvements, their cost savings. The hard data spoke clearly. The Draconids asked about hybrid approaches. Could they transition gradually? Keep some energy weapons while adopting ballistic systems? Absolutely, Dreth assured them. That is actually our recommended approach. Transition primary forces to human weapons. Maintain specialized plasma units for specific applications. Combined arms doctrine gives maximum flexibility. He explained the tactical integration. How energy weapons and ballistic weapons could support each other, different tools for different roles. The Draconids were particularly interested in this approach. By the end of the presentation, they had signed a preliminary contract worth 8 million credits, but they wanted something else too. "We need training advisors," their senior officer said, "not just for weapons but for tactical thinking. The human approach to warfare is fundamentally different from ours. We need to learn that philosophy, not just the equipment." Dreth promised to arrange it. He had connections now with human military advisors across dozens of worlds. Part of his business was facilitating these educational relationships. After they left, Dreth took a break in his private office. Through the window, he watched mixed species training exercises on the range below. Aliens from 4 different planets working together with human weapons and tactics. The coordination was impressive. His evening conference call with the Valorian Weapons Consortium was significant. For months, Dreth had been developing a hybrid weapon system, a human ballistic rifle with an integrated plasma module for specialized situations. Best of both technologies in one platform, the consortium had been skeptical. They saw it as admitting that Valorian technology alone was insufficient. Dreth had spent considerable effort convincing them otherwise. The call connected. 6 consortium. Directors appeared on the screen, their crystalline faces showing cautious interest. Dreth presented the latest prototype designs. A standard human rifle with a secondary plasma emitter mounted below the barrel. Soldier could switch between ballistic and plasma fire instantly. Mechanical simplicity of human engineering combined with energy weapon capability for specific situations. This is not compromise, Dreth explained. This is optimization. Use the best tool for each situation. Ballistic rounds for reliability and cost-effectiveness. Plasma for cauterization, sterilization, or when energy signatures provide tactical advantages. He showed test results. The hybrid system performed excellently. Slightly heavier than a standard rifle but still manageable. The plasma module added only 3,000 credits to the base cost. Marines and Special Forces showed high interest. One director raised the obvious concern. Are we not simply admitting that our technology is inferior? Dreth had expected this question. A year ago he would have felt the same way. We are admitting that our technology is specialized, he replied. Plasma has specific advantages, but trying to make it do everything leads to compromises that reduce effectiveness. Better to combine technologies and maximize both. He displayed sales projections. The hybrid system had enormous market potential. Special forces across the galaxy wanted versatile weapons for diverse mission profiles. This filled a genuine need. Another director asked about human reaction. Do they see this as copying their designs? I have been working with Wilson throughout development, Dreth assured them. Humans embrace this approach. They never claimed their weapons were perfect for every situation. They have been remarkably supportive of integration efforts. The consortium directors discussed among themselves. Finally, the senior director spoke. We approve moving forward with production. However, we want this marketed carefully. Emphasize innovation and integration, not replacement or admission of inadequacy. Dreth agreed. He understood their pride. He had possessed the same pride a year ago. But he also knew that pride adapted to reality survived. Pride that refused to adapt simply died. After the call, Dreth sat alone in his office, looking at the old TX-9 plasma rifle mounted on his wall, his flagship product from the old days. Expensive, impressive, and ultimately too limited for most practical applications. He had kept it as a reminder, not of better times, but of wrong thinking. That rifle represented everything he had believed about weapons, technology, and progress. Beliefs that humans had proven incorrect in 2 days of demonstrations. His console showed a new message. From Wilson. She wanted to discuss a joint venture. Earth was developing next-generation weapons systems and wanted input from alien partners. About designing for multi-species use from the beginning. Dreth smiled. A year ago, the idea that humans would ask his opinion on weapons design would have seemed absurd. He was the one who had been educated, not the teacher, but that was the human way. Learn from everyone. Adapt to everything. Never assume you have all the answers. He composed a reply accepting the meeting. Then he checked his schedule for tomorrow. More training sessions, 2 new client consultations, a meeting with his engineering team about improving plasma module efficiency. Every day was full. Every day was challenging, and every day he learned something new. His assistant knocked and entered. Sir, we received an interesting inquiry. A museum on the Valorian homeworld wants to create an exhibit about the transformation of modern warfare. They are asking if you would provide materials and commentary. Dreth considered this, an exhibit about his own failure and redemption, about being wrong and learning to be right, about pride and humility. Tell them yes, he decided. I will provide everything they need. including footage of me mocking human weapons and laughing at their simplicity. His assistant looked surprised. Are you certain? That footage is not flattering. That is exactly why it matters, Dreth replied. Others need to see that even an expert can be completely wrong. That admitting error is strength, not weakness. That learning is more valuable than pride. After his assistant left, Dreth stood and walked to the window. Below, a young Valorian soldier was training with a human rifle under the instruction of a human sergeant. The soldier's form was perfect. The sergeant nodded approval. That scene summarized everything. Different species working together. Different technologies integrated. Different perspectives combined for better results. Dreth had spent 30 years believing he knew everything about weapons. Humans had taught him in 3 days that he knew almost nothing about what actually mattered. Effectiveness over appearance. Reliability over sophistication. Practicality over prestige. Simple questions that led to profound changes. He returned to his desk and began drafting recommendations for the Threllian Confederacy. Not just a list of weapons to buy, but a complete philosophy of warfare, adapted for their specific needs. This was his work now. Not selling products, but teaching thinking. Not marketing technology, but spreading understanding. And it all started because he had been arrogant enough to mock primitive human weapons. His greatest failure had become his greatest education. Dreth looked at the footage icon on his screen. The original recording from that first day at Station Helios 7. Him laughing. Wilson staying calm. The demonstration that changed everything. He sent the file to the museum with a message. Show this to everyone. Teach them that being wrong is the beginning of wisdom, not the end of credibility. His console chimed with Wilson's reply to his earlier message. She proposed meeting next week to discuss the joint development project. She included a casual comment. Looking forward to working with someone who actually listens. That is rarer than you would think. Dreth smiled. He had learned to listen because he had been forced to hear. Now listening was his greatest skill. Outside his window, the training continued. Human weapons in alien hands. Human tactics adapted for alien minds. Human thinking spreading across the galaxy not through conquest but through simple effectiveness. And Dreth, the dealer who had once represented everything wrong with the weapons industry, was now teaching others the lessons he had learned. Pride was expensive. Humility was profitable. But more than that, humility was honest. He had mocked primitive human weapons. Those weapons had not just defeated his business model, they had educated him about reality, about adaptation, about survival. The galaxy was changing. Species were learning. Cooperation was replacing competition. Effectiveness was defeating prestige. And it all started because one arrogant arms dealer finally learned to shut up and listen. Dreth began his work on the Threllian proposal. He had reports to write, analyses to complete, recommendations to make. Good work, honest work. Work that helped people instead of just taking their credits. A year ago he had been rich, successful, and wrong about everything that mattered. Now he was wiser, humbler, and actually making a positive difference. The human weapons revolution had not just changed the weapons market. It had changed Dreth himself, and that, he had finally learned, was the real lesson worth teaching.